Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Informed Design webinar. My name is Tatiana. I'm a product marketing manager for Autodesk Informed Design. And I'm joined today by Gareth Spencer, one of our customer adoption specialists. Gareth works closely with teams who are getting started with informed design, so he brings a lot of hands-on experience to today's session. Before we jump in, just a quick note. Any future developments we talk about today are subject to change, so please don't base any purchasing decision on what we discuss. As always, our roadmap is evolving, so some of the features we'll preview today may change down the road. Here's what we'll cover today. We'll start with a quick overview of industrialized construction to give some context for Autodesk Informed Design, and then we'll walk through a demo, highlight some of the new features we've released since last year's launch, and Gareth will share a look at what's coming next on the roadmap. And we'll wrap up with the Q&A session at the end. Before we start, we'd love to get to know a bit more about you. So we've prepared a quick poll. So please take a moment to respond. We'd love to know how familiar you are with industrialized construction and informed design, what your role looks like, and which tools you're using for CAD or modeling. I'm just going to give you 10 more seconds to answer the questions. All right. Thank you for your responses. Let's get started. Let's start with a brief overview of industrialized construction. Industrialized construction can mean different things depending on the context, but at its core, it's about applying manufacturing principles to the built environment. It's a scalable approach to AECO that uses manufacturing techniques to make the design to build process faster, safer, more cost-effective, and more predictable. It also supports repeatability and helps teams deliver more sustainable outcomes across the entire project lifecycle. Industrialized construction brings together three core manufacturing capabilities. First is prefabrication, so shifting effort away from the job site by producing products, assemblies, systems, or even full buildings in a factory setting. Then we have productization, where building products are defined, categorized, and surfaced in a customizable formats or kits of parts. This allows owners and designers to make informed decisions earlier in the process. The third piece is DFMA, or Design for Manufacture and Assembly. This is a rules-based approach that helps teams configure and optimize products for efficient integration into projects. With DFMA, we're not just designing products, we're enabling building scale configuration. It also allows product data to flow directly under fabrication with less manual rework, so prefabrication isn't happening in isolation. Together, these three capabilities form a scalable approach to industrialized construction, and one that shifts key decisions earlier in the project timeline to improve speed, cost, and buildability. Now let's look at why industrialized construction is gaining so much traction, starting with the global demand we're up against. The building industry is under pressure like never before. There's a major gap between what's needed and what's being delivered. By 2050, the global population is expected to exceed 10 billion. Urbanization is accelerating too, with 68% of people projected to live in cities by then, up from 55% today. To keep up, the industry would need to deliver 13,000 buildings every day, with 75% of those in the residential sector to address the growing housing crisis. And at the same time, global building floor area is expected to double by 2060, and a third of what exists today will reach the end of its life cycle by 2040. That means even more demand for retrofits, repurposing, and rebuilding on top of new construction. Beyond demand, there is another critical challenge the industry is facing right now, which is workforce pressure. There are growing issues with attracting and retaining talent across the construction industry. Nearly 1 in 4 construction workers is over the age of 55, and as they retire, companies are not only losing skilled labor, but also valuable institutional knowledge. Labor costs are rising, and the talent pool isn't keeping up. So, to stay competitive, companies need to do more with the teams they have. So, investing in upskilling, preparing workers for the evolving demands of the job. And that evolution is happening fast as technology and delivery models change. Workers need to continuously learn and adapt so faster than ever before. And finally, the way we build today isn't just inefficient, it's also unsustainable. Current methods in construction generate massive amounts of waste and fall short on sustainability. The construction sector produces 35% of landfill waste, and buildings are responsible for 40% of global CO2 emissions. There's growing pressure to take meaningful action, but adoption of the tools and processes that drive better performance and reduce waste has been slow. And as it stands today, the industry is not on a path to meet these macro level challenges. So, with all of these pressures, growing demand, workforce constraints, sustainability challenges, it's clear that the traditional way of delivering buildings isn't enough. And let's look at how industrialized construction can actually improve the way AECO teams work, not just in theory, but in the day-to-day project delivery. Construction projects tend to follow a linear path, like plan, design, build, operate, and that's the traditional AECO workflow. And now, if we map industrialized construction capabilities, productization, DFMA, prefabrication onto this workflow, we see something interesting. Productization actually starts outside of the project. It's about defining products in advance so they can be used across multiple projects. But today, the decision to prefabricate usually happens after design is complete. That makes it lagging decision. While it still brings value, like reducing labor on site, this approach isn't scalable. And it's not what we mean by true industrialized construction. To change that, we need to move the key decisions earlier in the life cycle, not just at the project level, but at the program level. And that means introducing productization and DFMA upfront during planning and early design. And this shift is what we call the left shift, moving decisions to productize, procure, prefabricate to the start of the project lifecycle, where it can have the biggest impact. When we map a more detailed industrial construction workflow, these steps look a little different. So we need to define and discover products, incorporate them into the building design, manufacture those products, and finally assemble the building. To make this work, the tools we use need to span both the building scale and the product scale, so across ACO and manufacturing. And just as important, the data needs to move freely between them. So the IC workflow isn't fragmented, and that's what enables a true feedback loop for continuous improvement. The ideal IC workflow is clear, but the reality for most teams looks different right now. And this is an example of a current customer workflow. So instead of smooth handoffs, we see manual data transfers, or sometimes worse, complete recreation of data at each stage. And it's time consuming, it's error prone, definitely not scalable. And the tools just aren't set up to support a connected end-to-end industrialized construction process yet. And this is exactly where Autodesk is focusing, connecting AECO and manufacturing to support industrialized construction. We already have mature tools in both spaces, and now we're building the connective tissue that brings them together to enable a more seamless workflow across productization, DFMA, prefabrication. And the goal is to make collaboration easier, reduce rework, and help customers move more from fragmented handoffs to connected, scalable processes. Now that we looked at the bigger picture of industrialized construction, let's talk about how we're making it real. Informed design is a solution that we launched last year to help organizations to put industrialized construction into practice. It enables teams to design with certainty so they can deliver projects faster, higher quality, and less waste. And to walk us through what that looks like, I'll hand it over to Gareth.
Thank you. So what we've tried to do here with informed design and bringing it into our ether, we currently have tool sets that are focusing on the AEC space, so architects, engineers, construction, but we also have our tool sets that focus on our manufacturing side. And previously, we've always worked necessarily in silos, but what we're trying to do is work more collaboratively. So how we've introduced this is by bringing informed design into the workflow. So informed design is not actually a product itself, it's actually a product that connects into our other solutions. So we have the initial development of our information inventor. With informed design, we have the ability to then transfer that information to be shared through the project to the Revit users who have accessed that information. So as you can see on screen, we've got a little bit of a workflow of how this works. So informed design itself is an add-on inside Inventor, add-on inside Revit. It connects through the Autodesk Construction Cloud via Docs, but we also have our web application that again sits over Docs. So it allows us to create information once. We can transfer that information from the Inventor environment through using our permission-based access in Docs to then create that data and place it into the Revit environment. This could be standalone or static information. This could be parametric or rules-based information that's shared through. That gives us the ability to take that information at the end and create the data that we need to go into prefabrication or manufacturing as we need it. This allows us a continuous workflow. As things change, we can control how that information is shared, but also control the information which is most up to date as appropriate. So to walk you through, I'm going to talk through three different steps here. So first and foremost, like I mentioned in the last slide, we have informed design for Inventor. This allows us to continue to model as we would do previously inside Inventor. Whether it's a single part, a fully assemble inside there, we can create it as a parametric or a static object. We can assign the information required that's going to be transferred across into the Revit environment, such as on here we mentioned BIM content. So this is parametric information that you might need to control and share. We can offer a rule set which allows the user that's in Revit control the object that they're placing in. This could be anything from door, window, wall, etc. That will allow them to control the rules within the design parameters set by the product manufacturer and then publish that product to be accessible by the Revit designer. This gives us the ability to discover specific products like you would do normally. You go to a website and download the information. This workflow is slightly different. We can then customize it to suit the requirements we need to place into our designs and then insert the design as we require. But then also making any necessary changes as we go through the project, bearing in mind that some things will change on a regular basis, others may not. And then share the project back directly to the whole project team or just back to the project manufacturer themselves. And then fabricate the information from that by opening the file, looking at the files that we need to produce, i.e. bids or materials, shop drawings, non-native formats. But we can select the requirements that we need and generate those outputs to then go into manufacture or operations afterwards. So how does this work? So this could be a whole supply chain, and I'm going to talk about a building here. This could be infrastructure or any project. So we have the initial suppliers who are supplying information, and the typical workflow in previous ways would be they would create their information inventor, repopulate that information inside the Revit environment as another file that's not connected in any way, or the designer would model their own. This approach allows the supplier to give them a common catalog of information that they require. You can see here on the examples on the left-hand side, and I'll use some examples here. It could be a door, it could be a window, it could be a wall as an example. They can share that through that common platform, allowing the designer, whether this is an internal member of the team in the same organization or a third party that they're accessing the data, gives them the ability to take that information, place it into their designs, not having to put placeholders as it would do previously, and access that information as they need. That allows them to work with inside the parameters that they have from the design, but also knowingly that that can be manufactured as well. And then once the design is finalized and it's been approved, we can take that information and export that data out at scale. Just like you would do when you have notification that the design is acceptable, you go back to Inventor and do it manually. So this allows us to generate all the information that we require at the end of the project, or sorry, at the end of the design process, ready for manufacture or fabrication. Here's a short video I'm going to go through just to explain how the process works. You'll see here we have a door on screen. The door is something that's been modeled in Inventor. It's an assembly. As you can see, we've got some logic behind this for those who are already using our logic. You can see we put some configuration, and typically this is how the designers would typically work in the Inventor side, controlling the object as they would need to and standardizing it so they can choose the design principles that they're going to work to. This allows them to change information within their design as much as possible. Within the design here, you can see we've gone through, we've just made a few changes and we've applied it to the screen. Great. We can do that as much as possible. And it's a great way to control how the model is working. With Inventor, it gives us the ability to have as much detail as we need, as little as detail as we require as well, and gives us the ability to export out our drawings, our bill of materials when we need to. As you can see here, with this iLogic form here, it's controlling lots of things how we work. With Informed Design, it gives us the ability to do the same thing. So you'll see on the ribbon here at the top, we have two add-ins, BIM definitions and Informed Design. So the BIM definitions one, you'll see we have a tab with multiple panels that we can choose from. In this case, we want to control this and set this up so we can use the Informed Design workflow. First and foremost, we need to make sure that we utilize the right information and publish it in the right way. So we're going to set the BIM properties. So you'll see on here how Inventor works and how Revit works are completely different. So we need to make sure that when we transfer the data of it works in the right way. So the behavior, how is the model going to work? Is it going to be a standalone generic object? Is it going to be hosted to a wall, floor, or ceiling, or a face? Are we going to set it to a specific category when it goes into Revit? So for example, a door needs to align to a door category. When we set to the right category, it gives us all the standard parameters that we can align to. We can map across parameters within inside the Inventor environment, adding further parameters as we require, ensuring that we get the right data that's transferred across into the Revit environment. So you can see here we have the ability to control what we need based on the information we've already provided into our Inventor model. This could be as little as possible or as much as possibly needed. We can define as much data in there as we need to transfer that data across. We then have the ability to add our product definition. What a product definition is setting all the settings that are going to be published and utilized by the Revit user when it goes across. As you'll see on here, first and foremost, we have to set the location where the information is stored and define any drawings that we may have set up as a template. So we're not just thinking about transferring across a Revit file, but also the information we export out at the end. So in here, what you'll first and foremost see, there's a couple of things we can choose from. Configurable, so this one will have rules, or a non-configurable, which could be a static object, for example, a chair. When the parameters are added into the Inventor model, which you'll see on screen here, we can choose the right parameters we want to use within our rules. And also we want to publish across, because there are going to be some parameters in there which are just controlling things in the background or might not necessarily required that we need to place in. Once you've added those parameters, we can go into our rules. First and foremost, we need to make sure we have a correct form and how that looks. On the right-hand side of the window, you'll see we have the form. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see we have our tabs that we can control and how we place in. This allows us to set how the form will look when the Revit user accesses the information, making sure we have the right titles, drop-downs, and so on and so forth. Then we have the input rules. So this is using what we call code blocks here. So it's Google Blockly if anyone that wants to know any further information. This allows us to put in our rule sets from simple, do we want to know the max or minimum? We want to control, is it a list? So are we selecting from multiple values? Are we changing objects? Are we setting certain things that if I change one value, it will automatically update other things? So this can read your iLogic that you've placed into your model as well. So you can control the object in the ways that you need it to. For example, the length, the width, the height, as you need. Setting the constraints in here will allow the Revit user to work within those boundaries rather than having to remodel from scratch. Then on the outputs, you'll see here, we have the ability to share the information. First and foremost, we can set out the RFA. And because we can use model states, we can define the level of detail. In this case, you'll see we've got two. Primary, which is the whole level of detail, and BIM, which is a low level of detail. But you can define as many as you need to share the information. We can define which ones we want to share so the Revit user has access to them. We're thinking about the end game here as well. Do we want to share the entire Inventor files? Which drawings we want to export out when we're generating outputs from a DWG to a PDF as an example. Bill of materials. So which bill of materials do you want to share? Both types, primary or BIM. And then neutral formats which might be required, for example, SAP files, STEP files, and GBL. So this gives the ability to export more information out. And as I mentioned earlier, we export this information out through Construction Cloud currently. So it allows us to assign a project, assign a location where the information is going to be published to. Once it's published, it will then be pushed into the cloud, and you'll see here we can select and we can see the information. This allows us to see, one, what's been published, and two, the information in regards to release. So we're looking at release status. So you can see here we have release 1. This is default, but let's say further down the project we may have had multiple releases. We want to define which ones are accessible by the Revit user. So this gives us the ability to share the information as we go through. Now we can take this one step further. So for example, here we have a modular unit. We also have a balcony inside there, and you can see we control, again, the level of detail. You can see that quite easily changes. From this, we've got the whole detailed model here. And we put constraints inside there. We've put some functionality in there to change how that works and performs. So again, if we look at the product definition from the Inventor side here, and we go to our rules, you'll see there's some rules set up there, and we have the ability to control that. Now, like everything, we should always test before we publish, so make sure things work in the right way. So you can see here, we're just changing the module. So we're just changing the module to have different layouts, expand it into 2 modules or 3 modules in some cases. So we can configure just like we would do typically in Inventor. But this information is not just going to be in here, we're going to transfer it through the informed design workflow and utilize it inside the Revit environment. So we can see here, we can put as much detail in as we need to, allow us to change things within here. So you can see we're just changing and updating the exterior window, and it's updating the exterior window on that one. So it allows us to change and configure as we would to. But this is giving us the ability for the Revit user also to do the same inside Revit. So when they place this object in, it looks and feels like it should do in regards to information. And they're not having to remodel and do it from scratch. As you can see, there's some examples of drawings that we can utilize. And typically, once the design is finalized by the designer, i.e. an architect, the information is then passed back to the manufacturer. They would then go and create all the relevant information and spit out the drawings, bill of materials, and any other formats required. If I take this when it's now going to the Revit environment, so a simple thing again here, we have another add-on inside Revit. This add-on allows us then to place information in. So from a Revit user point of view, again, this could be same organization or it could be a third party. They would go to the product icon here and then select the actual location, i.e. the project, and the folder within there. Having the permission base allows them to open the file here. And you can see on the left-hand side, they have the configurable table that they can access. And they can generate as many as they require. So you can see here, we're just configuring how we want this to look. We're having a simplified variant. And then we're going to hit the generate button. So what will happen here is now they're generating the information. It's going to first and foremost start generating locally through your local drive, i.e. machine, and then it's going to go into the cloud as well. What you'll find is some objects that are not highly detailed will be a lot quicker and generate very fast. Those who are larger like that, they may take a little bit longer. But you can see here we have a loadable Revit family we can now place in. We place the object in, we can then finish the design as it would need to. But the best thing about that, it allows us to utilize all the different products that are being shared by our product manufacturer. We can access, for example, here we've got a staircase. We're going in, we're going to go configure and look at that. Now, the best thing about this, you can see on the screen here, these have been pre-configured. So anyone who has access to the informed design workflow here, they don't have to configure each size and type every time. If someone does it as part of the team, others will have access to that to allow them to do the necessary work. If we need to change anything, you can see here, we're going into a new release state. So a new version has been created. They're now going to change the settings and generate the new variant to then place in the environment. This allows us to keep up to date with the designs as the design changes from the manufacturing side. As you can imagine, some projects do start and they take a longer time, so things may change quite consistently over the project. But again, it allows us to go in, select the existing one and replace and change them live in our view. Because the model's now updated, we've got all the right information in there, we can save that data and access it as we would need to. So all we need to do now is save that model directly to the cloud so we can access the information as and when we need it. So the next step is going into our web app. So for those of you who know about Construction Cloud, we have Autodesk Docs. So you'll see it's very similar to how Autodesk looks and feels. So this could be Autodesk Docs, this could be Autodesk Docs BIM 360. Sorry, BIM 360, not Autodesk, BIM 360. As you'll see here, we can access the model. So we still have the same view and platform here. We can now access our information. So we can see here, we've got this product, we can select it. We can select one or multiple elements. It has all the information that you would need to access, which we've already put into the model. But also we can still view it, we can still look around the model as you would do normally, view the properties, etc. We can now generate the outputs directly through here. And what you'll see is everything that we selected right at the beginning is now accessible. So the user is not having to go back to Inventor and automatically export out any drawings, bill of materials manually. This is reducing their time and the wasted time that they would typically have to do this. This could be from a few minutes to a few hours to potentially a few days on projects that are quite large. When we've selected them, we can position where the information is going to be saved. This will go to Autodesk Docs projects, BIM 360 projects, or even Fusion Team if required. As you can see, we're generating the outputs there, and it will go to the release page where we're generating the information. As it goes through, you can see we're generating a few files here, but this could not just be a few files that are showing on screen. This could be hundreds of files at once, saving a lot of time and resource by doing this. Because the information is saved in the current project, we can easily access it by going open, and it will open up the Docs project here. And because the Autodesk Construction Cloud is accessible and we can see the information directly through there, we don't need any third-party applications such as Inventor itself, Revit, or any other applications. And as you can see here, we can actually view the drawing, we can view CSV files, we can view SAP files and step files directly through the cloud. So we don't need to have access to that. So the organization who potentially is receiving this information, again, this could just be the factory that's part of the business, or it could be a third party. All they need is access to a web cloud on a machine, or they could be utilizing a tablet, in the workshop, so they can access the information. And any changes that necessarily need to happen can easily be updated. And again, new generating outputs can be shared and utilized. So that gives us the ability to share the information all the way through the workflow, from the start to the design to the fabrication. And all that information, again, is captured through Docs in the current way. So you can access that information and share it with all the parties on the project, whoever that is. So that's the current workflow and how we work. There's lots of things we're doing in the background to ensure that Autodesk is keeping up to date and making sure that our tool sets are working in the way they should do. So we've been releasing lots of new great functionality and features over the last 12 to 18 months that we've been working. And what you'll see here, we've just released in recent months the ability to publish static content. This may not sound very big in some cases, but from the way we had it before, you would have to publish configurable content or at least put one parameter in. We've now made it available, so if you just want it so it's just one family to be loaded into Revit, we can do it as static content. This has allowed people to share information faster, more efficiently as well. And this gives people the ability to choose how the information is going to be shown in Revit. Because in some cases, it might not be a configurable element. It might just be a static object. The next things we've released, because again, Inventor and Revit work very differently, is when we're publishing our, for example, doors, windows that are going to be sitting into walls, we need to be able to cut a hole directly in that wall. So we've introduced how we can use void bodies inside our Inventor environment, place them on our object. So for example, a door. When we're placing it into the wall, it will cut. We can cut the hole for that door or window as we're working. Again, we're making it work in the ways we need to inside Revit. And then we have one functionality, which I know customers I've been working directly, which is very important. We released Informed Design on Inventor and Revit 2024. We've been adding it to all the newer versions after they've been brought out, so 2025, 2026. And one of the most recent feature adds, we now have the ability not just to create the file in Inventor, place it in Revit 24, 25, or 26, but we can create in any version of Inventor from 24 upwards and place in any version of Revit. So for example, if I model my elements inside Inventor 26, I can export that out and someone can actually place it in Inventor 26, 25, or 24. We've taken the stab to make sure that we're only working with the latest versions of the applications. So one thing just to note, all the functionality that's been added into Informed Design works across all versions 24, 25, and 26. We currently won't have it supported any early versions because this is a version where we started off with 24. And moving forward, we'll continue to do this with all latest versions. So when 2027 comes out, we'll add Informed Design workflows and processes to that. So the next thing is, and again, I think this is really important, we've not got every bit of functionality that will suit everybody's needs. So we've introduced our Informed Design API beta to the public domain. This allows both yourselves and partners who may work with you very, very closely to develop any third-party add-ons that will connect with Informed Design to do things that you may need it to do. Whether that's connecting into maybe an internal ERP system as an example, whether that's making, for example, maybe a configurator in the cloud that you might want to access from a sales point of view for the salespeople to see and use the information. But this is giving the ability now to access the information that we need live through our API on APS. And although I've just highlighted a few, there is many things that we're still working on as a team. We've only just scratched the surface. We're working and moving forward. So I'm going to show you some highlights of the roadmap we've currently got, things that we've already delivered or are delivering, and things that we're thinking about moving forward in the future. So we're always looking for your ideas of how we can improve and move forward. So we've just highlighted 4 key areas here. So as the content itself, the API, the designer and author, people utilizing the information, and then insights. You're providing the feedback that you need. So over the next couple of slides, I'm just going to walk you through what we've currently done and how we're doing it, and give you insight into what we're doing currently. So from a content point of view, we have introduced sample files directly for the Revit users. So for those who want to try out Informed Design from a Revit point of view, previously had to have Inventor or have files shared with them. So if they want to look at the workflow and how it works, we do have public sample files which are accessible directly through the Revit environment so you can place them. We're going to go and connect into Content Catalog because we realize that customers may want a public location where they can access that information, both from an internal point of view to the business and an external point of view. So we're looking at delivering that in the near future. That will give people access from a product manufacturer's point of view to give anybody outside who they work with very closely initially and actual other product manufacturers and also designers, contractors, engineers who may be accessing or need access to information. From an API point of view, we're going to continue to evolve this to open up those boundaries that may be locked currently to allow users to build on top of what we're doing. So API was launched a few months back at DevCon, so it's very fresh to the market. And again, we'd love to hear your feedback on that. From a design and authoring point of view, we're going to help how our Revit users utilize information even further. So as I showed you generating outputs from the cloud, we're going to have the ability to generate them directly from Revit. So you can access it from there and not have to go into the web app. We're also going to take into consideration, we currently have our workflow from Inventor to Revit, but we're going to start looking at introducing Fusion as the way to author your CAD files, because we know everyone doesn't just work in Inventor. One of the biggest challenges we've had from the start when we introduced this is we can only select loadable family categories currently, but we are working with the Revit team very closely to have the ability to link into our system categories, and that will allow us to push the information across for any category that's available in Revit. And one really important, especially from a product manufacturing point of view, it's nice to know the metrics of what information is being utilized through the workflow. So we're going to introduce an insights dashboard, like for those who already may utilize things like the construction cloud, you have them in the background already. But we're going to do it for informed design as well. So there's many things that we're currently working on, and there is a few more highlighted on the screen. And as you can imagine, there's probably too many for us to go over today. But we have plenty of information available for people to access. And if you talk to the regular staff from the Informed Design team, we'll be able to fill you in with more information. So they're going to continue with the content information and be able to have people to have the information that's accessible through content catalog. We're also going to connect into other applications such as building connected. We're going to evolve our API even further. One of the key ones, which I feel, and again, this is a personal preference, is having informed design information through the Autodesk viewer, which in my eyes gives people the ability to share their information and show the data without having to see it in Revit first. Our third-party extension, again, rules-based to add to that. From an authoring point of view, improve on the workflow again inside Revit. So the product definition information that we publish through, have the data inside Revit. We can easily see from a product point of view which are Revit families and which aren't, which are informed design ones. Potentially have rules-based authoring inside Revit. So we're thinking about the other direction is the Revit users may author something, they may have rules-based, but that data is in Revit rather than starting Inventor. We're going to improve how we work with our BIM definitions tools, which you saw in Inventor. But then also, because when we're publishing the information from Inventor to Revit, we don't have a shared parameters file automatically created. We're looking at how we can do that and add shared parameters in to improve the workflow inside Revit, and then enhance the insights product data that you can get out even further as we go through. And then later down the line, we're continuing. And as you can imagine, we are just over year one from release. It's about 18 months since we released Informed Design. We're continuing to grow and move forward. And again, you can see there's a few things on there which people might highlight. AI being one of them, as you can see there, that's really, really good. And we're going to improve on that. AI is a big thing right now from not just from an Autodesk point of view, but from an industry point of view. And then going down, you can see connecting into other applications like Forma, potentially CAD-based applications like Civils 3D and Plant. Dynamo connection to be another one as well to help control and how we work with things, but continue with our API and our insights and grow that as far as we can. So I hope you found that useful today. We've covered a lot of things, but we could actually spend a lot more time as well to increase the awareness and information that's in there. So I hope you found it useful, and I'll hand you back over to Tatiana.
Thank you, Gareth. That was a great walkthrough. Before we move into the Q&A, we'd love to know if you're interested in learning more about how informed design could fit into your own workflows. So we're going to launch a quick poll. Just let us know if you'd like to connect with Gareth or other specialists for a follow-up conversation or a deeper dive into our specific use case. And we're just going to give you some time to answer the question before we move on to Q&A. Okay, amazing. I see we already have quite a lot of questions. Gareth, do you want to take this one? Can informed design bring manufacturing details and with price before you start any design? Is it connected to any central database or manufacturer who posts on any portal or website can only be accessed?
Okay, so from a manufacturing detail information. So when we talk about the information that you're working with, if you've got your data saved locally in your Inventor file, currently the way the workflow would work, you're taking whatever information you've published and accessible through Inventor. So if that information is put in the form of a parameter, you can access that data. What we're looking at to do going forward is connect to things like Building Connected, where that will allow you to access more information. We talk about data and information and pricing and things like that. That should be able to give you a bit more in the regards to data and information that you want to share and connect into. So currently, the workflow, again, like I say, we're only still very early. We're not, into our second year of actually producing the information. So going forward, there's the ability and option to be able to start to take into those consideration. So with the API, there is an ability to look at how we could connect into maybe an internal database that has that information and transfer it across. One of the things that I found from people I've worked with is typically things like price will not go into the design model that's going to be utilized live. That's normally done separately, but it's not to say that couldn't happen. So if you want to talk a bit further, again, I'd feel like if you could reach out, we could have further discussion and go into that a bit more detail if you want.
Thanks, Gareth.
Okay.
Um, Hassan has a two-parter question. So the first question is Informed Design a plugin to be added to Inventor? And can Informed Design also transfer all the attributes to Revit, like material, grade, user-defined attributes? I think we can put the link for download in the chat as well.
Sure. So great questions. I'll answer the first one first. So because we are Autodesk, we have developed the add-on for Inventor and Revit. So how it works currently is anyone who has access to Inventor or Revit can access the add-ins automatically. There is no charge for you to do that. So if you've got access to Inventor or Revit, you'll see under your Autodesk account or Informed Designs there, or you can go to our product page and download the add-in. There are add-ins available for 24, 25, and 26 versions of Revit and Inventor, so you can download them today. That gives you the ability to utilize the tool set. All you need to do is basically set everything up to work in the way you need it to. So having a Autodesk Docs account to share the information. Going forward, the content catalog will be available as we're working towards that to access the information through there. So you'll be able to get the data as you want and go through that. Just to highlight as well, as I mentioned, you can utilize the add-ins both for Inventor and Revit. If you're working and you want the whole workflow with the generated outputs, that's our web app, which is, again, you'll have access to the Docs project. You'll be able to open that and go through that and set the permission based. To generate the outputs right now, there is no charge. So the actual service itself, you can publish your information, place it into Revit and generate those outputs at scale as many as you need. And there's no charge to that right at this current time. Going forward, there potentially will be a charge on generating the outputs utilizing flex tokens, but we've not assigned anything just yet. So, please utilize the tools as you would do now. And then in the future, there may be a charge, like I say, on that side. Regards to the information you put into the Inventor model and transfer across, yes, you can add in things like attributes. From a material point of view, because of material library across all Autodesk platforms, you can add the materials that you've got in Inventor and in Revit, and it will work. Currently, there's a limitation when you're creating custom materials and actually showing them in Revit, but we're currently working on that to see how we can get that to work. So if you have a custom material, it displays correctly inside there as you need. So, there's certain things we can do. There's certain things we're working towards right now. So hopefully we'll have that moving forward in the future.
Excellent. Thank you, Gareth. There's a question from Thomas, how to access the admin settings of Informed Design add-in?
When you say admin settings, it'd be interesting to learn more about that question. Maybe if Thomas can add another question into a bit more detail, what sort of admin settings you're looking to access, would be great if you could share a bit more on that.
Yeah, you can add it to the Q&A or chat directly, please. Um, okay, next question. Can informed design be integrated with ACC Bridge to automate content updates across multiple projects or teams?
Great question, and the answer is yes. So if you've got your project set up and you're working in there, and let's say you win more projects and you want to share the information across multiple projects, yes, we can do that. So what happens is you just set up your bridge as you would do to a certain project in a certain location, and then you can bridge the information. So whether it's going to from your project to the other project or from the other project back, we can utilize the bridge functionality, which is something we introduced, I think it was late last year, because we needed to, rather than have to upload it to several projects, have the ability to share it around from project to project, which gives the ability to do that, which is great. And it was well needed.
Yeah, agreed. Um, where is the data stored and is the add-in available in multiple languages?
Okay, so the add-in currently is only available in English. We will look at bringing it for other languages moving forward. So currently, if you're working in a non-native English speaking, when you get the add-in, it will be in English. But we are working towards that in the future. I can't give you timelines right now. So that will be something we'll be looking at. The data, when you publish the information from Inventor, it goes up to the cloud. Because we're using Docs environment to access the information, it doesn't actually store the data when you're publishing from Inventor in the Docs environment. It's in our web background, but you can't access that data. So, for example, if someone get access to that folder, they can only download the Revit file and place it in. When you generate the outputs, you're specifying the location where those files are stored. So, for example, if you're just exporting out a bill of materials or a drawing, you're just exporting that information out to that location where you see that data. So realistically, your information is locked behind our walls. No one can have access to that and no one can get data from that. The only way they can download files or generate outputs is having access through there. So you're not actually sharing your Inventor file specifically unless you do that at the end from the generated output side.
Thank you, Garrett.
Great, no problem.
Um, there's another question from Anish. What upcoming features are planned for static content support and how will they impact content reuse across projects?
Well, from a static content, we currently have the ability to have it parametric or static. So from a static point of view, if you have added in all the information you need to that file to be shared, you can do it today. It'd be interesting to learn what sort of things you'd like to see in that from a static point of view. What are the data you want in the model to transfer across and how it looks? But if you set that model up in the way it's correctly, again, I'm going to use an example as a chair. The chair is not going to change in shape or size. You're going to send it across. It's going to be one material color. Let's say it's a white plastic chair. It's going to be as shown. If you've added in product data into the parameters and you've included that as part of that, that data will go across as it would do. And when the Revit user goes to place it in, they're just inserting the file, placing it in the model wherever it sits. That could be once or multiple times. Then the information's there and it can be utilized. So it'd be really nice to learn anything else what you'd like to see supported in there moving forward. We're always looking for your feedback. And your feedback can be done through our community pages. We have a forum out there which we love to see people post and hear your comments. We also have an ideas forum as well where you can share the information with us what you'd like to see moving forward, because we are getting lots of information back from the customers we're currently working with.
Yeah, and you can also add that information to post-webinar survey as well if you'd like. Okay, next question is what level of Inventor skills are required to use the form design add-in and do you need iLogic?
Okay, so yeah, from an Inventor point of view, yes, you need to learn Inventor, so at least a basic level of Inventor modeling. If you don't want to include some iLogic in the model to transfer across, you can still utilize it, especially from a static point of view, because it's not going to actually change, not going to do anything. If it's when you go into more parametric, like I was showing earlier, we had the door, that was quite a parametric model. We had the modular unit, again, that was quite a parametric model. There was iLogic built behind that. I'd recommend from an Inventor point of view, at least getting the basic knowledge to utilize it. Going forward, get some iLogic training or learn how iLogic would work to enhance the tools and how they work. Because we can work with parameters, adding parameters in there. For example, if you're creating something, you want to change the length, width, and height, we can utilize parameters for that. We don't necessarily need iLogic, but it is good if you can utilize and learn both, and it will enhance your skill set even more because the workflow when you were utilizing informed design doesn't take very long to learn the informed design part. It's more of making sure that your inventor skills are proficient.
Mhm. Is there a way to see within Revit which families have been published with needed step or PDFs?
Not currently. So when the information is placed into Revit, it's just as a standard Revit family, and you'll have all the families inside the Revit environment. The way we set it up today, and again, it's a great question, and it'd be good to maybe learn more about the question because we're going to find this back to our development team. Is the reason why you'd need to see the PDF or the step file from a Revit environment, what's been published? If, for example, information that's placed into the Revit model is just seen by the architect on the project, they're sharing the model back to the construction cloud for then the product manufacturer to export the data out. They may not need to see the step file or the PDF. But if you wish to, and it's all saved to the same project, you have access to that location, you will be able to see what's been generated as an output. That's a great question, actually. I'd love to learn more.
Okay, I think that's it for our questions, unless there are some last minute questions that you guys want to add into the Q&A box. Can give you a couple of seconds. All right. Well, if you don't have any more questions, thank you all so much for joining our webinar, and we hope to see you at our next one.